The coop wasn't much to look at from the outside. Just a modest structure of reclaimed wood, corrugated metal roofing, and a patch of fencing I'd scavenged from the old barn before the subdivision swallowed up the last vestiges of country life. But to me, that little chicken coop in the back corner of my property meant something far deeper than just eggs and feathers. It was peace. After 31 years in the public school system, 23 of them as a history teacher and 8 as a vice principal, I retired with a limp in my step and an ache in my chest that no medication could quite reach. My wife, Ellen Whitaker, had passed 2 years before that. Cancer sudden and cruel, the kind that leaves silence in a house where once there was humming. My daughter, Emma Whitaker, had moved 3 states away. I didn't blame her. Life pulls you where it needs to, but it left me with empty afternoons and a porch too quiet for its own good. Then came the chickens, 8 of them. All hens, all with names. Henrietta Mabel Goldie, Beatrice Lucy Clara Fern, and Louise. I built the coop with my own hands, not from blueprints, but from muscle memory and instinct. A nesting area, a roost, a small enclosed run where they could peck and scratch. The kind of thing you'd find behind any farmhouse 50 years ago. I added a rain barrel to catch water, a small solar light for winter warmth, and even a hanging feeder made from an old coffee can. Every morning, like clockwork, I'd step outside at 6:30 a.m. with a mug of coffee and let the girls out. They clucked and bustled with purpose, like they had a union meeting to attend. They made me laugh. They gave me something to care for. And in return, they gave me eggs with golden yolks and a reason to put on shoes before noon. I registered the coop with the city's small livestock ordinance the week after I built it. It was all above board. I had the paperwork, the permit number, and even a visit from an urban agriculture official who called it the best designed backyard setup I've seen all month. That little pat on the back meant more than I let on. Our neighborhood, Red Oak Hollow, wasn't always under HOA rule. When I bought the lot 15 years ago, it was unincorporated county land, a mix of mid-sized homes and large empty plots that folks used for gardens, beekeeping, even a few horses. But that all changed 5 years ago, when a group of younger residents organized to modernize the community. The HOA was pitched as a way to improve safety, raise property values, and create shared spaces for everyone. I didn't vote for it, but I wasn't worried. I had my fence, my privacy, and a chicken coop tucked behind hedges and flowering vines. Then came the letters. The first one arrived on pale gray paper with an embossed HOA seal at the top. Dear Mr. Whitaker, our records indicate the presence of an unpermitted livestock structure on your property, which may be in violation of Community Code 3.1.7 regarding accessory buildings. Please address this issue within 14 days to avoid penalties. It was signed by Karen Madsen, HOA president, recent retiree from somewhere up north, and self-proclaimed community aesthetics champion. I'd seen her before striding through the neighborhood in designer tracksuits, clipboard in hand, the kind of person who treated a picket fence like a crime scene. I sent a copy of my city permit in response, along with a photograph of the coop and the documentation showing that Red Oak Hollow still fell under the city's urban agriculture ordinance. 2 days later, another letter. Thank you for your response. However, the HOA design guidelines prohibit freestanding accessory structures not matching the primary home's exterior style. Your coop's rustic design and visible fencing are out of alignment with the architectural harmony of the community. Architectural harmony. As if my coop had disrupted the feng shui of her beige stucco kingdom. I wrote again this time, citing the grandfather clause in the HOA Charter Section 5.2, which clearly stated that existing structures built before the HOA's establishment were exempt from aesthetic compliance rules. I heard nothing back, and so I continued. The hens thrived. I donated eggs to the local food pantry. The neighbors directly adjacent to me, Juan and Maria Rodriguez and Lynn and Min Nguyen, loved the coop. Their kids would come over on weekends to feed the hens, sit on overturned buckets, and listen to my stories about World War II rations and how every soldier in Europe would have killed for a fresh egg. Then came the worst day, March 14th. I remember the date because it was Ellen's birthday. I had a doctor's appointment that morning, just a routine checkup at the VA clinic downtown. I was gone from 9:15 to just before noon. As I turned the corner onto Sycamore Drive, something felt wrong. A heaviness in the air. A silence that didn't belong. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw it. The back gate was open. A yellow excavator sat idling just beyond the hedge. My garden beds were trampled. And the coop, my coop, was gone. In its place, flattened earth. Broken boards. Feathers. Lots of feathers. I ran or stumbled, really through the yard, heart pounding. The air reeked of diesel and sawdust. I dropped to my knees where the nesting boxes had once been and sifted through the wreckage, pulling out what was left of Fern's favorite roost. A scrap of gingham cloth I'd nailed there years ago. It was torn. A uniformed man stood at the property line. "I'm sorry, sir." "Orders from the HOA," he said. "We were told the structure was non-compliant and abandoned. I was just doing my job." I didn't hear anything after that. Not the rest of his explanation. Not the hum of the truck as it backed away. Not even the angry wail that must have come from my own throat. The coop was gone. The hens were gone. And something in me, something quiet and precious, snapped. Later that evening, I found another letter taped to my front door. Removal executed under Emergency Compliance Enforcement Order 6.4. Thank you for your cooperation. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled out every document I had, the city permit, the ordinance, the HOA charter, the photographs, the email threads. I organized them into a binder labeled every section and opened a blank legal pad to begin what would become a war journal. They had bulldozed more than a chicken coop. They had bulldozed trust, dignity, and decency. But they had no idea what they'd awakened, because I may have retired from teaching, but I never forgot how to build a case. And I was about to teach the HOA a lesson they wouldn't forget. I should have known it wasn't just a misunderstanding. The first time I saw Karen Madsen inspecting my yard, clipboard clutched like a weapon, sunglasses perched high on her head, standing just beyond the boundary of my fence, I chalked it up to curiosity. A neighbor checking out a few hens, maybe wondering how I kept the smell down, or why my tomatoes were already sprouting in February. But the look on her face wasn't curiosity. It was calculation. That same evening, I received the envelope. It was hand-delivered, not mailed. Folded in half and wedged into my screen door like a ransom note. Pale gray stationery embossed with the red oak hollow HOA crest. A leafy branch intertwined with the letters ROH, as if branding suburban control with the same sanctity as a family crest. I opened it slowly, reading each line, like a man scanning a landmine map. Subject notice of non-compliant structure. Immediate attention required. Dear Mr. Whitaker, our recent visual inspection of your property has revealed the presence of a freestanding structure located in the rear quadrant believed to be a chicken coop. As per Community Covenant 3.1.7, all accessory structures must conform to community aesthetic standards and be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Structures that are not pre-approved or that do not align with the exterior design language of the neighborhood are subject to removal. Please remove the aforementioned structure within 14 calendar days to avoid escalation or penalties. Escalation, penalties. There it was in black and white. Not a conversation, not a neighborly inquiry, just an edict. I took a slow breath and sat down at my dining table, flipping open the folder I'd kept since the day I built the coop, permit number 6742A, issued by the City of Austin under Ordinance 1923.3. Authority to maintain up to 10 hens on a private residential lot under 1/4 acre, provided the structure remains sanitary setback compliant and predator secured. Mine was all of the above and more. I'd even added cedar shavings to the nesting boxes to keep flies down. I'd installed a solar-powered fan to circulate air in the summer heat. The coop was a model of responsible micro-farming. No noise, no odor, no roosters. I drafted a response. To whom it may concern, I am in receipt of your notice, dated March 2nd, regarding the alleged non-compliant structure on my property. Please be advised that the structure in question is a permitted and legal chicken coop built under the authority of the City of Austin's Urban Livestock Ordinance, permit number 6742A. The coop was constructed prior to the formal establishment of the Red Oak Hollow HOA and is therefore protected under Section 5.2 of the HOA's own governing charter, which provides grandfathered status to pre-existing compliant installations. Should you wish to discuss this further, I am available for a neighborly conversation, but I will not dismantle a structure that is fully legal, inoffensive, and vital to my daily life. I sent it certified mail. I also emailed a copy, CC'd the city's urban agriculture officer, and hand-delivered one to the HOA drop box at the community clubhouse, just in case they claimed non-receipt. 3 days passed. Silence. Then a second letter. This one colder, more formal, typed in legalese with heavy margins and intimidating phrasing. Notice of violation. Final warning. Failure to comply with Community Code 3.1.7 will result in the initiation of corrective enforcement procedures under authority of Article 6.4. HOA reserves the right to remove structures that pose aesthetic or functional conflicts with the agreed-upon vision of the neighborhood. There it was, again. Vision. As if a few hens quietly pecking in a corner disrupted the suburban mirage they were trying to sell. Never mind that I didn't live on a golf course. Never mind that the neighbors on either side of me had zero complaints. Never mind that half of Red Oak Hollow still had rusted fences and dead grass from last summer's drought. The Coop wasn't the problem. Control was. They needed someone to push around. And I'd made the mistake of showing I cared. I called the HOA office the next morning. A young man named Kyle Thompson answered, probably a college student doing part-time admin work. He sounded uncomfortable as soon as I introduced myself. I'm calling about the violation notice regarding my chicken coop. A long pause. Then, yes, Mr. Whitaker. That issue has been escalated to the compliance team. I believe our president, Ms. Madsen, has reviewed the situation. Did they tell you I had a city permit? I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. Not a growl, not a shout, just the kind of quiet that comes before a landslide. He blinked. Sir, I don't get into the legal stuff. They had paperwork, said it was cleared. I bent down and picked up a scrap of painted wood, Fern's favorite perch, a piece of barn pine I'd carved myself. I turned it in my hand, brushing away the soil clinging to its edges. You killed my chickens, I said flatly. You destroyed my property. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked genuinely sorry. But sorry didn't bring back what had been lost. I didn't know there were animals inside, he offered. And that's when I snapped. You didn't check. You didn't open the door. You didn't listen. I stepped closer. He stepped back. I wasn't threatening him. I didn't need to. My grief did all the talking. You didn't pause for even one damn second to ask if this was right. He shook his head. I do what I'm assigned. Please don't yell. I'm not yelling, but I was shaking. He left quickly after that, mumbling something about calling his supervisor. The excavator rumbled to life and backed out slowly, leaving tire tracks like bruises through my garden beds. The machine disappeared around the corner and I was alone. Just me, the dust, the feathers, and the broken skeleton of something sacred. It didn't feel real until I saw the paper taped to my front door. HOA letterhead. Emergency Enforcement Order, Article 6.4. No signature, no timestamp, no prior notice. Just a bolded sentence. Structure deemed non-compliant and removed per Community Code authority. There was no mention of the permit I'd filed. No reference to the documents I'd submitted. No acknowledgement of my appeals. It was as if I'd never existed. I stood on the porch with the paper in one hand and Fern's perch in the other. Then I went inside, shut the door, and sat in the dark of the hallway for a long time. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears would come later that night, when I opened the fridge and saw the half carton of brown eggs marked Henrietta in shaky handwriting. But in that moment, I was still. Not calm, not numb, just still. I thought about Ellen. How she used to say, "It's not the people who scream that scare me. It's the ones who go silent." I stayed silent for a full hour. Then I got up, washed my hands, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and pulled out every legal document I'd ever kept since buying the house. I spread them across the table like maps for a war I hadn't known I'd been drafted into. First, the city permit, intact, valid, legally binding. Then the HOA charter, a copy I'd annotated the day after they bulldozed my roses the year prior for invasive color deviation. I flipped to Article 5.2. The grandfather clause. There it was, clear as day. All structures and installations constructed prior to the establishment of the HOA and compliant with municipal regulations at the time of installation shall be deemed exempt from subsequent architectural restrictions. I had my proof. Next came emails, letters, timestamps, photos. I created a timeline, the co-op's construction, the permit approval, the establishment of the HOA. The first warning letter, the notice of removal, the destruction. I cross-referenced everything. They had no right. And worse, they knew it. The next morning, I drove to the Austin Planning and Zoning Department. I didn't ask for a form. I asked for a person, someone with the authority to file a complaint, not against a neighbor, but against an HOA. Her name was Trina Brooks. Late 40s. No-nonsense eyes behind tortoise-shell glasses. She listened, didn't interrupt. When I was done, she tapped her keyboard for a moment, then asked, "Do you have photos?" I pulled out my phone and handed it to her. She swiped paused, then handed it back. "Submit all of this. Officially. We can open an investigation if the structure had a valid permit and they conducted unauthorized demolition. There are city fines, and if this was part of a broader pattern, it is," I said. "They've done it to others, just no one who fought back." She raised an eyebrow. Well, she said, sliding the complaint packet across the desk. Maybe now's the time someone did. I left the office with a folder full of paperwork and a fire in my chest that felt like justice with sharp elbows. When I got home, I walked back to the flattened patch of dirt where the Coop had stood. I picked up a bent nail from the wreckage, turned it over in my palm. Then I drove to Home Depot. Not for vengeance, but for wood. Because I wasn't going to rebuild the Coop. I was going to build something bigger. Something they couldn't tear down with a bulldozer and a clipboard. I didn't sleep the next night either. I tried. God knows I tried. I lay in bed with the fan humming above me, the curtains drawn tight, the TV off, but my mind wouldn't let go. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the Coop. As it had been bathed in soft morning light, the hens scratching calmly in the run, Fern pecking at the tomato slice I'd left as a treat. Then I'd see the flattened ground, the twisted boards, the feathers. Over and over. The grief wasn't just about animals or wood or a project I'd poured my time into. It was deeper. It was the feeling of being violated in a way that didn't leave bruises, but pulled at something sacred inside you. They hadn't just taken my Coop. They'd taken my sanctuary. And something in me was done asking politely. At dawn, I brewed a cup of coffee, opened my notebook, and began my battle plan page by page. I listed every violation the HOA had committed: unauthorized entry onto private property, destruction of a permitted structure, no prior warning or hearing as required under their own charter, misuse of Article 6.4, which only applies to structures presenting imminent danger, disregard for city ordinances overriding HOA authority. And then I found something interesting. Buried in the HOAs. Publicly accessible permit applications, yes. I'd requested them months ago, just out of curiosity. I discovered an active construction permit for a clubhouse expansion project. I remembered the email that went around about adding a covered pavilion for events and beautifying the shared community space. What I didn't remember was ever voting on it. Digging deeper, I noticed something else. The application claimed unanimous resident support, including a page of signatures. And there it was. My name, in tidy forged cursive. I stared at it for a long time. The way you stare at something both foreign and intimately personal. They had forged my name, not just bulldozed my Coop. They'd used my identity to push through a permit for a project no one had ever explained in detail. Funded with HOA reserves and apparently fast-tracked with backroom approval. That changed everything. I called Walter Dunn, the retired land use attorney I'd once taught with at the high school, a cranky genius named Walter Dunn. He picked up on the second ring. "You're calling early," he said, voice gravelly with sleep. "I have something big." I explained the forged signature, the permit, the missing hearing minutes, the destroyed Coop. There was a pause, then a low whistle. Well, he said they didn't just step over the line. They sprinted across it, waving a flag. We met that afternoon at his kitchen table. He flipped through the documents, squinting at the forged signature, scanning the HOA charter like a man rereading a book he helped write. "You've got cause for civil action. Possibly even criminal identity fraud, destruction of property, trespassing, abuse of governance. If the city gets wind of that permit manipulation, they'll revoke it faster than you can say, clubhouse barbecue." I leaned forward. "So we file?" He shook his head. "Not yet. First we build a case so solid they won't have anywhere to run." That night, I set up a new folder on my desktop. I called it Operation Henhouse. Not because I thought this was a joke, but because I needed a reminder of why I was doing this. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about principle. I called Trina Brooks from Planning and Zoning the next day. and asked her to pull the HOA's full permitting history. I called Carla Davis at the city's Permit Enforcement Division and informed her of the possible forgery. And I emailed the HOA with a formal demand letter prepared by Walter stating that I was seeking full restoration of the destroyed structure, formal written apology from the board, investigation into permit fraud, cease and desist on any further development until a third-party audit of board conduct was complete. Their reply came swiftly and smugly. Mr. Whitaker. The HOA board maintains that your structure was in violation of community standards and that all enforcement actions were executed in accordance with bylaws. The clubhouse expansion project is unrelated to your situation and has been legally permitted through appropriate channels. We encourage you to consider mediation before engaging in adversarial legal action. Karen Madsen, President. I read it 3 times. Mediation. They wanted to meet me halfway after they'd run me over. I declined. Instead, I drafted a second letter. This one addressed directly to the City Planning Commission, complete with all supporting documents, timelines, forged signature evidence, and a cover letter signed by Walter himself. The next 48 hours were a blur. Emails, calls, scans, witness statements. Lynn and Min Nguyen signed a letter stating they'd never been consulted about the clubhouse vote. Juan and Maria Rodriguez offered photos of my coop from before the HOA existed. I contacted the local paper anonymously at first and told them a story about a neighborhood where a chicken coop had triggered something much bigger. And then it happened. A city official called. Her name was Lizette Morales. She was calm, professional, and very serious. We're revoking the HOA's construction permit pending investigation. She said, your documentation shows a clear discrepancy in required community approval. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. But I did walk out to the flattened spot behind my garden, stood in the sun with my arms crossed, and imagined the laughter of kids feeding hens, the rustle of sunflowers, the low cluck of a freshly laid egg. I imagined something better, because I wasn't just going to fight the HOA. I was going to build something in their place, something they couldn't bulldoze. I didn't expect to become a detective in my own neighborhood, but that's exactly what happened once the city revoked the HOA's construction permit. The email from Lizette Morales had been short but decisive, the kind of language bureaucracies only used when they'd seen enough to know they'd been lied to. Permit No. 2102-RH for the Red Oak Hollow Clubhouse expansion is hereby suspended pending further investigation into community signature discrepancies and procedural violations. It was the first real crack in the wall, but cracks weren't enough. I wanted collapse. So I kept digging. I started by requesting access to all HOA meeting minutes from the past 18 months. According to their own bylaws, these minutes had to be made available to any dues-paying member upon written request. I submitted mine with the help of Walter, who added a stern legal phrase or two about non-compliance exposure and state-level audit triggers to encourage cooperation. The documents were sent 3 days later in the form of a messy PDF clearly scanned in a hurry. Some pages were crooked, one looked like it had coffee stains. But the content, that was gold. In the minutes from a meeting dated 8 months prior, Karen Madsen had stated, per community input, the clubhouse expansion will proceed under expedited permitting. All required resident signatures have been collected and submitted. The community fully supports this effort. It was a lie. I knew it. My neighbors knew it, and now I had it on paper. Even more damning was a small note scribbled in the margin of one page, likely added by mistake during internal discussion. Should we forge the last 3 names or wait for real ones? My hands actually trembled. I sent that page straight to Lizette. An hour later, she called. We're freezing all HOA development activities. The Department of Neighborhood Integrity will be conducting a formal review. There may be criminal referrals. That night, the neighborhood app exploded. Screenshots of the revocation notice were posted by residents. A few cheered. Others were in shock. But the most surprising thing was how quickly the silence broke. People who had never spoken out began commenting. Wait, we were expanding the clubhouse. I never signed anything. They destroyed Mr. Whitaker's coop for this unforgivable. A neighbor I barely knew, Sarah Munoz, mother of 3 PTA volunteer, messaged me privately. I think it's time someone organized a full vote of no confidence in the board. I'll help. I responded simply, I've got a bigger idea, because it wasn't enough to remove the rotten wood. We needed something new to grow in its place. The idea came to me that morning. as I stood in the patch of land where the coop once was. The space was still raw, the earth scarred and rutted by the bulldozer's tires. But in my mind, I saw more than just a coop. I saw rows of raised garden beds, a pen for goats, a beehive box, a walking trail edged with mint and sage. I saw children collecting eggs, teenagers planting seeds, elders like me finding peace in tending something living. A community farm park. It sounded crazy at first, like a dream pulled out of a storybook. But the more I turned it over in my mind, the more I realized the land they used for the clubhouse expansion was part of a green easement city designated for low-impact communal benefit, and a farm park that qualified. I called Walter again. "Can I pitch an alternative project to the city?" He chuckled. "You can do more than pitch it. You can propose it formally. You've got standing, and now you've got momentum." So I did. I drafted a full proposal, convert the now vacant HOA expansion plot into a cooperative farm park, restore a chicken coop as an educational site for kids, use community volunteers for maintenance, fund the project through micro-grants donations, and reallocating unused HOA fees, hold seasonal classes on gardening, composting, and sustainability. I attached letters of support from neighbors 20 within 2 days. Sarah Munoz collected another dozen. Shirley Carter, my longtime neighbor, and now my fiercest ally, got the PTA to sign on and even offered to bring Girl Scouts to help paint the fence. I sent the proposal to the city. 2 weeks passed. Then came the meeting, held in a modest chamber downtown. The public hearing on the revocation and reallocation of use for Red Oak Hollow Parcel number 87B was standing room only. News had spread. Even the local ABC affiliate sent a camera crew. Karen showed up. She wore a pearl blazer and carried a thick binder. Her face was tight defensive. She tried to speak first, but the city moderator stopped her. "Before we begin, we will allow Mr. Hal Whitaker to present a formal community alternative to the now suspended project." I stepped up to the podium with nothing but my words and the truth. "I'm not here to settle a grudge," I began. "I'm here because something that gave me peace was destroyed without cause. I'm here because we have a chance to turn that wrong into something that feeds more than just anger." I laid out the vision. The city listened. So did the neighbors. So did Karen, arms crossed, jaw clenched. When I finished, there was silence. Then the moderator said, "We'll take written public comments for 72 hours before deliberating." 3 days later, the city called me. Approved, unanimously. The clubhouse expansion was canceled. The land was to be reallocated to a community stewardship agreement under my leadership, with a review board made up of residents. The Red Oak Hollow Farm Park was born. Karen Madsen resigned the next morning. No fanfare, no speech, just a one-sentence email to the HOA mailing list. "I will no longer be serving as board president. Best wishes." I stood in the backyard again, same spot, same view. Only this time I saw possibility where loss had once stood. It was time to build again. Not just a coop, a community. The formal title of the complaint I filed with the city read like something out of a zoning textbook. "Petition for administrative action regarding permit irregularity and unlawful destruction of permitted agricultural structure, Red Oak Hollow, HOA Parcel, number 87B. But beneath the dry language was something far more human pain and justice, and a deep, quiet fury. I submitted the packet in person. It was heavy, nearly 120 pages of documentation signed, affidavits, photographic evidence, HOA charter excerpts, municipal zoning code highlights, time-stamped photos of my coop before and after, and most damning of all, a printed copy of the forged signature on the clubhouse permit application. Walter had highlighted it in yellow and written in all caps. Note: complainant did not authorize or sign this form. I handed it over to the city clerk with a steady hand and a voice that, despite everything, didn't shake. She gave me a stamped receipt, nodded solemnly, and said, "You did everything right, Mr. Whitaker." I wasn't so sure. Not yet. But I appreciated the words. 3 days later, the city issued an immediate suspension notice on all HOA construction projects, citing evidence of procedural misconduct, fraudulent documentation, and pending administrative review. Signs went up around the parcel, where the clubhouse expansion had already begun. Orange fencing was installed. A lock was placed on the construction gate. And just like that, everything stopped. The contractors packed up and left. The portable toilets disappeared. The hum of machines, the dust clouds, all of it vanished overnight. It was like someone had hit a mute button on the entire operation. But the silence didn't mean peace. Karen was livid. She sent out an HOA-wide email that same afternoon, full of condescending flourishes. Due to an unfortunate and baseless complaint filed by a certain resident, the HOA has been forced to suspend its beautification project. While we deeply regret this inconvenience, we want to reassure you that we are doing everything in our power to address the situation and restore progress to our shared community vision. No mention of the permit. No mention of the forged signature. No mention of the Coop. Just that familiar undertone, this is your fault for not going along quietly. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't have to. The neighborhood had already begun to shift. People started forwarding me emails, notes they'd received from Karen in the past, threats, fines, reminders. A woman on Birch Lane had been fined $50 for non-standard mailbox decals. A young couple on Maple Street had been told their toddler's tricycle on the front porch was a visual obstruction. Shirley Carter Sweet 72-year-old Shirley had received 2 letters about her wind chimes being audibly intrusive. It was all coming out now. People weren't just angry. They were embarrassed for having accepted it for so long. A few of them came by my house. Not for drama, for solidarity. One man, Carlos Lopez, who worked nights and had always kept to himself, showed up with a stack of wooden planks in his truck bed. "You rebuilding that coop?" he asked. I smiled. "Eventually. I'll help," he said. "Built a barn with my dad when I was 15. Can't let a bunch of pencil pushers tear it down and walk away." He wasn't the last. By the end of the week, we had over a dozen volunteers. Word got out, not just locally. A small write-up ran in the Austin Chronicle. HOA chicken coop controversy leads to permit shutdown and a community's reawakening. They quoted me at the end. "You can tear down a structure, but you can't bulldoze a spirit that's rooted." That quote was printed on t-shirts 2 weeks later. I didn't authorize it, but I didn't stop it either. While the city reviewed the HOA's conduct, I began holding informal yard meetings every Sunday. We'd set up folding chairs on the lawn, pass around lemonade and cookies, and talk not about lawsuits or bylaws, but about what kind of place we actually wanted to live in. Someone suggested a reading corner under the old oak tree. Another offered to donate lumber for a raised bed program. Lynn and Min Nguyen volunteered to start a compost exchange. And someone, bless them, brought a box of baby chicks peeping softly in a cardboard crate, their eyes wide and curious. "Let's bring the hens home," she said. I didn't cry, but I came close. By the third Sunday, I presented the full blueprint of what we were building together. The Red Oak Hollow Farm Park. It would include a new city-approved chicken coop, a series of vegetable garden beds assigned via lottery, a community greenhouse for year-round planting, an open-air pavilion for weekend markets or workshops, a sensory garden for kids and seniors, a walking path around the perimeter lined with native pollinator plants. I held up the plans sketched in pencil on graph paper and said, "We're not just replacing what was taken. We're planting something that will outlast all of us." The applause that followed was unlike anything I'd ever heard in this neighborhood, full of relief, of joy, of resistance, turned to something redemptive. 3 days later, Lizette called again. "We've completed our preliminary investigation," she said. "And Mr. Whitaker, we're revoking the Red Oak Hollow HOA's permit authority for the next 12 months. All new construction must be submitted through a city liaison, effective immediately." I didn't cheer. I just nodded. A month later, the HOA held a special meeting. Karen didn't show up. She sent a resignation email, terse, ungracious, 2 sentences long. The remaining board members stepped down within a week. An interim resident committee was formed, and somewhat reluctantly and definitely humbly, I accepted the nomination to lead it. The first vote we took, unanimous approval to transfer the parcel formerly designated for clubhouse expansion into city-monitored green space under the new Red Oak Hollow Farm Park Stewardship Program. The coop would rise again, not in isolation, but at the heart of something bigger. And this time, no bulldozer would ever touch it. You could feel it, that quiet shift in air, like the first breeze before a storm breaks, or the smell of damp soil before a seedling pushes through. Red Oak Hollow wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was waking up. The day the city officially revoked the HOA's permit authority, Lizette Morales sent me a copy of the formal ruling. 4 crisp pages, stamped and notarized, outlining in dry legal language the total collapse of Karen Madson's carefully maintained illusion of authority. The conclusion read, "The HOA is prohibited from submitting, managing, or enforcing any municipal permit on behalf of Red Oak Hollow residents for a period of no less than 12 months. All project approvals must now proceed through city review with documented resident oversight. Translation: the clipboard Queen's Kingdom had fallen. The ruling hit the HOA like a thunderclap. Residents received notice in their inboxes the next morning. No spin, no sugar, just facts. And something about that transparency, that blessed overdue transparency, lit a fire across the community. By noon, I had 17 emails in my inbox. Some were simple. Thank you. It's about time. Where do we sign up to help? Others came with apologies. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I got a violation for my porch plants last year and just gave in. She fined me for my solar lights, told me they violated the nighttime uniformity standard. I thought it was just me. They weren't alone. One by one, people began coming forward. A grandmother down the street named Anita Patel shared that Karen had fined her $100 for improper curtain color after she put up purple drapes for her granddaughter's birthday. A newlywed couple had been warned for hanging string lights. A man with Parkinson's had been told his handrails were aesthetically disruptive. It wasn't just bad leadership. It had been quiet tyranny, and people were done. I organized a community meeting that Saturday, not in the stuffy clubhouse, but in the open field that was now officially the future Red Oak Hollow Farm Park. We brought folding chairs. I borrowed a microphone from the local school. Shirley Carter baked lemon bars. Carlos Lopez grilled hot dogs on a rusted Weber that still smoked like an old train. 87 people showed up. Some brought kids, some brought questions. Some just came to be part of something real for the first time in years. I stood in front of a hand-painted sign that read, Red Oak Hollow Farm Park by us, for us. And I said, we're not here to gloat. We're here to rebuild. Because what got torn down wasn't just my coop, it was trust. And the only way to restore it is together. Applause. Not thunderous, but steady, earnest. We spent the rest of the afternoon collecting ideas. We passed around sketch pads. Kids drew chickens and beehives. One little girl asked if we could name the new coop the Cluckingham Palace. We all agreed instantly. By the following week, we had organized 5 committees. Coop Construction Team, led by Carlos Lopez and me, with volunteers from 5 households. Garden Design Group, run by Anita Patel and Shirley Carter, who insisted on wildflowers community events planning. Spearheaded by Sarah Munoz, already talking about harvest festivals, education, and youth engagement. A high school science teacher named Devin Harris offered to run this park maintenance and sustainability. A couple of college students home for summer jumped in. It was happening, not in some abstract future, but right now, here in the dirt, where control used to sit like cement. Something green and good was growing. The city, surprisingly, was thrilled. Lizette called again. We've had 5 other neighborhoods call in asking how they can do the same. Yours might be the first HOA to actually dissolve top-down and be reborn as a stewardship model. I smiled. It started with chickens. She laughed. Doesn't it always? That week, we held a groundbreaking for the new co-op. Dozens gathered in the late afternoon sun, shovels in hand music playing from someone's Bluetooth speaker. The spot where my original coop had stood was now marked with fresh lumber, a new foundation, and a little stake in the soil with a handwritten note in memory of Fern, Goldie, Henrietta, and the rest. I said a few words, not long, just enough to mark the moment. They took down something I loved. But they didn't realize that when you clear a space, sometimes all you do is make room for something better. Then I dug the first shovel of earth. Kids followed with trowels. Adults passed plywood. One woman brought bags of feed. Another handed me a little red mailbox for egg deliveries, she said. Construction went fast. It always does, when it's fueled by shared purpose. We had the frame up in 3 days, nesting boxes in by the weekend, and the fencing installed with the help of 2 retired vets who insisted on military-grade reinforcement. I didn't argue. The hens arrived 2 weeks later. Rescues mostly donated by neighbors who could no longer keep them or who had hidden them quietly during Karen's reign. They clucked, they scratched, they settled. The first egg appeared on a Sunday morning. Clara, a gentle buff Orrington with a curious gaze, laid it in the new cedar-lined box. I held it in my hands like a trophy, like a miracle. I cracked it over a skillet that evening, made an omelet with chives and sharp cheddar, and ate it on the porch while the sun dipped below the rooftops. It tasted like justice. And the sound of chickens once again filled the air like a hymn. With the chickens back in their coop and neighbors showing up to volunteer even on hot afternoons, it was clear we tapped into something deeper than nostalgia or rebellion. This wasn't just about getting back at an HOA president or fixing one wrong. We were rebuilding the soul of the neighborhood one raised bed and roost at a time. But I knew if we wanted this to last, we had to do more than build it. We had to protect it. That meant making the Red Oak Hollow Farm Park official with the city, with the new HOA board, and with whatever bureaucratic fortress we had to knock on until someone let us in. I wanted that land locked in as green space, forever shielded from any future Karen with a permit form and a power trip. So I wrote the proposal. Not just a letter, a full project plan. 54 pages long, printed and bound, 3 copies. Title: Community Stewardship Proposal for the Permanent Establishment of the Red Oak Hollow Farm Park and Agricultural Education Zone. The opening paragraph said it all. In response to the recent conflict and subsequent unity that has arisen in Red Oak Hollow, the residents propose a formal transition of parcel number 87B into a city-supported cooperative green space, serving as a model of urban agriculture, environmental education, and civic empowerment. The packet included aerial diagrams of this park layout, photos of community build days, statements of support from 47 households, a budget showing our use of donated materials and minimal funding, letters of intent from local schools wanting to use the space for field trips, volunteer roster schedules and bylaws for community usage. I hand-delivered it to the Department of Neighborhood Engagement on a rainy Monday morning. The woman at the front desk flipped through the first few pages, looked up, and said, "This is incredible." I smiled. So were the chickens. Within a week, we had a meeting scheduled with a panel of city planners, parks department staff, and a few skeptical zoning officials. I invited Shirley Carter, Carlos Lopez, Sarah Munoz, and Maddie Evans's mom, the original dream team. I wore my nicest flannel. Shirley wore pearls. The meeting was held in a large conference room with a projector and a stack of notepads at every seat. We weren't treated like intruders, more like oddball pioneers. They asked tough questions. How will you maintain the land year-round? How will you ensure long-term engagement? What if the board leadership changes again? We answered every question. Carlos explained how we'd structured rotating maintenance teams by season. Sarah handed out a color-coded event calendar. I pointed to our partnership with the local high school's FFA chapter and the nearby Montessori Academy's garden club. Then I said the thing I'd been waiting to say. You won't need to micromanage this park. You'll just need to protect it. We've proven we can build. What we need is your shield. There was silence, then nods, then a round of genuine applause. 3 days later, we received official notice. The city of Austin is proud to designate parcel number 87B as a protected community stewardship zone under Chapter 23 to 3D4. Use of land shall remain in service to neighborhood agriculture, education, and recreation in perpetuity. Perpetuity. That word hit me like a bell toll. This wasn't temporary. This was legacy. We announced the news at the next community gathering. Someone brought a speaker and played Willie Nelson. Kids painted signs. We planted an oak tree near the front of the park with a small metal plaque that read, "Red Oak Hollow Farm Park, born from roots, built by hands, grown in unity." The next few weeks were a blur of motion. Real motion, the kind that's measured in wheelbarrow loads and muddy boots. The raised beds filled in with soil and seedlings. The walking path curved through lavender and thyme. Someone set up a swap shelf for extra eggs, lemons, and zucchinis. We held our first Saturday market with just 6 booths, honey eggs, handmade soap, wildflower bouquets, and one table for Maddie and her friends selling compost worms and lemonade. They made $26. I made them honorary board members on the spot. The park became a heartbeat. Every evening, families walked the path. Elders sat on benches. Teenagers painted murals on the fence. Even dogs seemed calmer here. One afternoon, Lizette stopped by. No clipboard, just curiosity. "This doesn't feel like a farm park," she said, watching kids chase chickens between the rows. "No," I asked. She smiled. "Feels like a revolution." And in a way it was. A quiet one. Built not on outrage, but on hammers and shovels. On empathy and elbow grease. On the radical idea that the best way to fight pettiness is to outgrow it. As the sun set over Red Oak Hollow, casting long shadows across the garden rows and golden light on the coop we rebuilt, I stood near the gate and watched it all unfold, life not just continuing, but thriving. Justice didn't arrive in sirens or courtrooms. It arrived in eggs and laughter, in basil and beehives. And the place they once tried to silence was now the loudest voice in the neighborhood. There's something poetic about building with the same energy someone once used to destroy you. Every hammer strike, every shovelful of compost, every new plank of wood nailed into place, it all felt like a kind of quiet revenge, not fueled by bitterness, but by purpose. Red Oak Hollow Farm Park became more than we planned, more than we dreamed. It grew beyond blueprints and spreadsheets and took on a life of its own. Life. And every inch of it was built with joy. We started small. One Saturday, 2 families showed up with wheelbarrows and gloves. The next, there were 5. Then 10. By the end of the month, we had volunteers. We'd never even met, people from across the city who'd heard our story on the local news or read about the co-op that refused to stay buried. They came not out of pity but hope, because something about what we were doing, rebuilding in the open, sharing it, freely planting something new on land that had once been ruled by fear, it struck a nerve. We weren't a protest. We were a blueprint. Kids helped build trellises and painted the tool shed with colorful chicken murals. One boy named Elijah Thompson built a worm bin from recycled pallets. His younger sister, Maya Thompson, started labeling every garden bed with hand-drawn signs: Tomato Town Pepper Palace and Lettuce Lounge. Someone brought hay bales. Someone else brought hammocks. And in the Coop, now twice the size of the original, Clara the Buff Orrington ruled like a queen. The local school district asked if they could host field trips. The community college offered interns to help with sustainability practices, and the city, they dropped off a new composting station and rainwater catchment tank free of charge. The final nail in the coffin of the old HOA came not with a lawsuit, but with a picnic. We called it the Great Replanting, a Saturday celebration to commemorate 6 months since the co-op was destroyed and 3 since the city officially transferred stewardship of the land. There was live music, face painting, seed exchanges, a kid's workshop on how to plant herbs in mason jars. Carlos grilled sausages. Shirley danced barefoot with 2 other ladies from her bridge club. Sarah read aloud from a children's book about chickens finding their way home. I stood back for most of it, letting the park speak for itself. But toward the end, someone handed me the mic. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need one. I just want to thank you all, I said, standing near the entrance gate under a new wooden sign, carved by one of our teenage volunteers. It read, "Rooted in Hope." You didn't just help me rebuild a chicken coop. You helped me rebuild something in myself. When they tore that coop down, I thought I was alone. But you proved that when one voice speaks up, others follow. And what you see around you isn't my victory. It's ours. People clapped. A few cheered. A little girl ran by holding a sunflower taller than she was. That evening, as the crowd thinned and the music faded, I stood with Walter, the retired land use attorney, who had become a kind of mentor through it all. He sipped a lemonade, squinting at the golden horizon. "You ever think this place would become all this?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I think Ellen did." He looked at me. I hadn't mentioned her much, not publicly. But that coop, that garden. It all started because I needed something to keep from unraveling after she passed. She used to dream about chickens, I added. Said they were grounding. Said they made people slow down. Walter nodded, looking out at Clara, and the other hens scratching happily under the roost. She was right, he said. That night, I sat on the front porch of the tool shed, watching the last rays of sunlight slant across the soil. I heard laughter from the path, smelled lavender and fresh basil on the breeze, and listened to the rhythmic cluck of the hens settling in for the night. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was rooted, grounded, whole. And the co-op, the one they tried to erase, now stood stronger than ever, surrounded by life, laughter, and the kind of community that no rulebook could manufacture. It turns out that sometimes the best way to win isn't by tearing something down in return. It's by building something so good, so whole, so full of light and welcome, that the shadows have nowhere left to settle. Fall arrived slowly that year, the kind of season that didn't crash in with cold winds or abrupt storms, but whispered its way across the park. The leaves on the oaks along the back fence turned a copper gold. The basil flowered. The hens grew thicker feathers. Life was winding down gently, naturally. But our work, it was just beginning. We had built something permanent, not in structure, but in spirit. People still asked me if I ever missed the old HOA days. The clean-cut lawns, the rigid order, the predictability. I always gave the same answer. Order without humanity isn't peace, it's just silence. The HOA had tried to control the neighborhood by eliminating what made it human, the messiness, the growth, the unexpected beauty of chickens and children and dandelions in sidewalk cracks. But once the mask cracked, once people saw the power they had together, there was no going back. In November, we held a harvest dinner at the park. Long picnic tables ran down the center of the path, covered in mismatched cloths and candles stuck in mason jars. Every dish came from someone's kitchen: corn pudding, sweet potato casserole, roasted chickens, pies with flaky crusts. Clara's eggs made it into 3 quiches and 1 custard. There were no rules about who could attend, no dress codes, no permits. Just neighbors, laughing, sharing food, and for the first time in years, belonging. I looked around and realized something startling. This was what I'd always wanted when I moved to Red Oak Hollow. Not fancy houses or pristine fences. Not manicured hedges or HOA newsletters in Times New Roman font. I wanted connection, roots, not just in the soil, but in people. And somehow, I got it through loss, through pushback, through chickens and chaos, and a Coop reborn from rubble. After dinner, as stars blinked into view and the last slice of apple pie disappeared, a few of us lingered. Carlos poured coffee. Maddie Evans sat beside me with her sketchpad drawing the Coop in pastel chalks. She handed me the picture. I added wings to it, she said, so it never gets bulldozed again. I smiled. It's perfect. I folded the drawing and slipped it into my back pocket. I still carry it. Weeks later, the final blow to the old HOA structure came not from me, but from the inside. The remaining board members, tired of being associated with the chaos, formally resigned. With no one left to run it, and after a unanimous community vote, the Red Oak Hollow HOA was officially dissolved. In its place, we formed a cooperative, the Red Oak Hollow Stewardship Council, a rotating group of volunteers open to all, governed by transparency and shared responsibility, not fines and fear. We published our values on the shed wall: respect all voices, grow what feeds, build what lasts. No one owns the land, we belong to it. Somehow that last line stuck with people. The park became more than a park. Schools visited every week. Retired neighbors gave gardening lessons. A local nonprofit helped us install solar lights. And on Sunday mornings, without ever planning it, people began gathering under the big oak tree just to sit. No agenda, no leader, just presence. And me, I wake up to birds and chickens. I tend to the herbs. I mend the fence when the wind takes it down. And I sit on the porch with a coffee that's never quite hot enough, watching kids pick cherry tomatoes and old men argue about compost. I never thought I'd be part of a story like this, but maybe that's the point. Maybe justice doesn't always roar. Maybe it clucks. Maybe it grows quietly in the margins until it's undeniable. Maybe healing doesn't arrive with declarations, but with shovels and sunlight, and the sound of neighbors laughing over a crooked trellis. They bulldozed my chicken coop, but in doing so, they cleared the ground for something stronger than fences or rules. They gave us room to remember who we are when we're not afraid. And now they drive past the farm park and wave. Some still pretend nothing happened. Some have moved away. But those who remain know the truth. The coop stood again. The chickens returned. The silence was broken. And no one, no board, no bylaw, no clipboard tyrant can bulldoze that kind of legacy. Not ever again.